the illusion of separateness, why the self you think you are doesn't exist. Imagine this: you walk into a room, flip on the light, and see yourself in a mirror. But the reflection doesn't follow you. It stares back, unmoving, unfamiliar. That's the moment you realize you've never really seen yourself. Not as you are. Not without the stories, the names, the identities, the masks. You've seen what you think is you. But what if everything you believe about what it means to be human is not just a little wrong but completely backward? Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." And yet, we spend our entire lives doing exactly that, trying to capture the self, control it, label it, fix it. But what if the self isn't a thing to be grasped at all? In the next few minutes, I'm going to unravel something so fundamental that once it clicks, you may never see yourself or anyone else the same way again. Let's begin.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We've been taught since childhood that we're separate, that I am over here and you are over there, that the universe is something out there, and we are these isolated minds trapped in fragile skin suits, observing it all from the inside. But what if that's a complete misreading of reality? Watts invites us to consider something radical: the idea that the self you identify with your name, your job, your nationality, your thoughts is not the real you. These are roles, masks, what the Greeks called persona, which literally means mask worn by an actor. So here's a question for you. Who are you when the mask slips? When no one is watching, when there's no one to impress, no identity to maintain what remains. Let's take it deeper. You think of yourself as a separate entity, but look at your body. Is your hand you? If you lost it, would you still be you? What about your thoughts? They come and go like clouds, but you don't control them. You don't even choose what thought comes next. Try it. Sit still and wait for your next thought. Did you choose it? So, if your body isn't fully you, and your thoughts aren't fully you, then who or what is? The idea of a separate self begins to dissolve the more you question it. And this is where Watts drops a philosophical bombshell. He says, you are the universe experiencing itself, not metaphorically, literally. You are not in the universe. You are the universe in a form that's become aware of itself. Let that land for a moment. If that's true, then human beings aren't isolated islands. We're moments in a cosmic process like waves on the ocean. No wave is separate from the sea. It rises, crests and falls, but it is the ocean. Just like you are not separate from the fabric of existence. You are it, in motion, temporarily arranged into this thing you call me. So here's a challenge. What if, just for today, you stopped pretending to be someone? What if you allowed yourself to be the process, not the product, not the name, but the unfolding? Think about how society reinforces the illusion of separateness. The moment you're born, you're named, labeled, measured, compared. You're taught to compete, to win, to stand out. But Watts warns us this obsession with identity creates suffering, because we cling to a self that doesn't actually exist in the way we think it does. And this has consequences. When you believe you're separate, you feel afraid. You feel like life is happening to you, rather than through you. You fear death, because you think it's the end of you. But if there is no separate self, then what dies? Just the arrangement, the form, not the essence. Here's a harder question. If you didn't have a name and no one had ever told you who you were, what would you be? Would you be a person? Or would you be a pattern? A rhythm? A current in the flow of time? These questions aren't meant to confuse you. They're meant to wake you up, because this illusion of separateness isn't neutral. It's the root of so many human problems. Why do we destroy the environment? Because we think we're not it. Why do we go to war? Because we believe in us versus them. Why do we feel so desperately alone, even surrounded by people? Because we've bought into a lie that we are cut off from the whole. But if you are the universe in motion, then every relationship is a reflection. Every encounter is a meeting with yourself in a different disguise. Every tree, every raindrop, every stranger on the street is you in another form. You might be wondering, how does this help me in daily life? It helps because when you start seeing through the illusion of separateness, you become less afraid, less anxious, less reactive. You don't need to constantly prove yourself because there is no self to defend. You don't need to hoard or dominate or win because nothing is truly outside of you. You can begin to live in alignment with the flow of life rather than against it. So here's a final question to carry with you. If you stopped believing that you were a separate self, how would your life change? Not just in theory, but in practice. What would you stop worrying about? What would you stop chasing? Who would you forgive? What would you finally allow yourself to feel? This isn't just philosophy, it's liberation. You are not a thing. You are a process, a dance, a movement of the cosmos, momentarily arranged into human form. And the suffering comes when we forget that and believe the dance is a dancer. So next time you look in the mirror, don't ask, "Who am I?" Ask instead, "What am I becoming?" Because the answer is everything. The myth of control, why all your struggles come from one mistaken belief. Let me ask you something that might change your life. What if control is the biggest illusion you've ever believed? We spend our lives trying to control everything: our image, our future, our emotions, our relationships, even death. But have you ever stopped to notice that the more you try to control life, the more chaotic it becomes? Alan Watts once said, "The more we struggle for life as pleasure, the more we are actually killing what we love." And that's the paradox we're going to unravel right now. Because what if your anxiety, your fear, your burnout, your constant striving, all of it is rooted in just one thing: the belief that you're in charge of all this? Let's tear that belief apart. From a very young age, you were told to take charge of your destiny, be responsible, make it happen, take control of your life. And so you did, or at least you tried. You created schedules. You made 5-year plans. You tried to control how people see you, how your body looks, how your future unfolds. But deep down, you know something's off. You're exhausted. You're constantly reacting to a world that doesn't obey your commands. Why? Because control is a story we tell ourselves to feel safe. But it's not how reality works. Let's test this. Can you control your next thought? Try it. Sit still and decide what thought you're going to think next. You can't. Thoughts happen. Emotions happen. Life happens. And yet we live as if we're the puppet master of a universe that has never once asked for our permission to act. Here's a deeper question: if you're not in control, who or what is? This is where Watts takes us into deeper water. He says, "You do not beat your heart. It beats itself. You do not digest your food. It digests itself. You do not control the rising of the sun, the pulling of the tides, or the unfolding of a flower dot. So what makes you think you control you?" We've confused the map with the territory. Our sense of being in control is just a model, a mental construct. But reality doesn't operate according to our models. It's fluid, alive, unpredictable, and trying to control it is like trying to catch a river in a net. And yet we're addicted to control, because it gives us a false sense of safety. But think about this: has trying to control things ever brought you peace? Or has it only brought more anxiety, more pressure, more disappointment? We plan our lives like chess games, but life is jazz improvised, messy, beautiful. But the more we try to fix the melody, the more we lose the music. Let me ask you something else. What would happen if you trusted life instead of trying to dominate it? Watts reminds us that the ego, the false sense of a separate, controlling me, is the root of all our suffering. It believes it must manage the world, fix every problem, optimize every moment. But that ego is just a collection of thoughts. It's not who you really are. When you believe you're the controller, life becomes a battle. Every failure feels personal. Every setback feels like a threat to your identity. You start to live in a state of constant vigilance, never present, never still. But what if you're not the controller? What if you're the participant? Look at nature. The trees don't try to grow, they just grow. The sun doesn't try to shine, it just shines. The river doesn't try to flow, it just flows. You were born from that same source. You are nature. So what makes you think you need to force anything? Here's a practical example. Have you ever had a breakthrough idea not when you were thinking hard, but when you were relaxed? In the shower? On a walk? That's not an accident. That's life expressing itself through you when you get out of the way. So here's a practice. The next time you're stressed, instead of doubling down on control, try surrender. Not giving up, but letting go. Letting go of the belief that you should be in charge of every detail. Try asking yourself, what is life trying to show me right now? Because when you stop fighting the flow, you start dancing with it. Watts would say, the art of living is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new and unique. Here's a deeper question. What if every moment of struggle you've had was actually the universe trying to undo your illusion of control? We avoid pain. We resist change. We fight what is. And that's where suffering begins, not in the pain itself, but in our resistance to it. When you try to control life, you close yourself off from its intelligence. But when you let go even a little, you open the door to something deeper than your plans, trust, but not blind faith, but deep, experiential trust in the unfolding of things, in the intelligence of the whole, in the mysterious rhythm of being. So you might ask, but if I don't control my life, what am I supposed to do? Just let things happen? No, you participate. You surf the wave, but you don't create the ocean. You play your part, But you don't write the whole script. You show up. You respond. You stay awake. And in that surrender, you find the paradox. You're most powerful when you stop trying to control. Because control is rigid, but life is fluid. When you align with that fluidity, you gain access to a strength that doesn't come from force but from flow. So here's the challenge I leave you with. Where in your life are you clinging to control so tightly that it's actually cutting you off from life itself? Is it in your relationships, your work, your image, your future? What would happen if you loosened the grip and trusted something deeper? Not because you know how it will turn out, but because you know that trying to know is what's holding you back. You are not the controller. You are the unfolding. And when you realize that, you don't lose power. You gain it, the real kind. The kind that isn't tied to outcomes, but to presence. So next time you're overwhelmed, breathe and remember, you don't need to control the wave. You only need to learn how to ride it. You were never born, the death illusion and the eternal now. Take a moment, breathe in, look around you. Everything you see, trees, people, the sky, your own hand seems to be unfolding in time. You were told you were born, and one day you'll die. That this life is a brief flicker between two eternities of nothingness. But Alan Watts asks, what if that's not true at all? What if you were never born in the way you think? What if death is not the end? What if time itself is the illusion? You see, your fear of death isn't really about death. It's about identity. It's about holding on to a self that was never truly yours to begin with. And once you see through that, everything changes, because the truth is far more beautiful and far more terrifying than we've ever been told. Let's go straight to the heart of it. You believe you came into this world, that you arrived, that at some point in time you didn't exist, and then you did. And that someday you'll go back to non-existence. But Watts flips this on its head. He says, you didn't come into this world. You came out of it, like a wave comes out of the ocean, like a leaf grows from a tree. You are the universe, expressing itself as a human for a little while. So ask yourself, if the wave disappears, where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere. It returns to what it always was. In the same way, when the ego dies, when the body fades, when the illusion of the separate self dissolves, you don't cease to exist. You return to what you've always been, the totality, the whole, the source. Let's go deeper. You're terrified of death because you think it's something that's going to happen to you. But notice, have you ever experienced non-experience? You remember being 5. You remember yesterday. You're aware now. But can you remember not existing? And no, sleep doesn't count because you wake up. So here's the deep question. If you can never experience non-existence, how do you know it's even real? Watts says, we are so absorbed in the idea that we are a me inside a bag of skin that we forget that this me is inseparable from the entire cosmos. Death isn't the opposite of life. It's the opposite of birth. Life has no opposite. Life is not a thing that begins or ends. It is the process, the dancing of energy, and the play of consciousness. You've been taught to live in fear of a moment that's inevitable. But what if that moment is nothing more than a transition? A shedding of form. Let's flip the script. What if death is not a failure of life, but its completion? And what if, just like waking up from a dream, death is actually a return to reality? This is where it gets truly mind-bending. Watts invites us to sit with time itself, because time is the stage on which this illusion of birth and death plays out. But time, as we experience it, is psychological. The past is memory. The future is imagination. All we ever really have is now. But we don't live in the now. We live in then. We live in what was and what might be. And in doing so, we miss the only thing that ever actually exists, right now. The eternal now. This moment isn't a stepping stone to something else. It's not a means to an end. It is the end, the arrival, the destination. And when you finally stop racing toward a future that never comes, you begin to live, fully, presently, eternally. So here's a question that could change everything for you. If this moment was all there ever was, how would you live differently? Would you stop waiting to be happy? Would you stop preparing for a life you never actually get to live? Would you finally let yourself love, forgive, breathe, be? Because the truth is, you're not on a journey from birth to death. You are the journey itself. You are the path. You are the unfolding. And in the deepest sense, you were never born, and you will never die, because what you truly are is not a person, not a story, not a memory, not a future. You are this awareness, this being, this presence. When a wave crashes, the ocean doesn't mourn, because it knows the wave was the ocean all along. So what does this mean for your life? It means you can stop clinging, stop pretending, stop fearing the end, because there is no end. There is only change, only transformation. It means you can start living not someday but now, not for a goal, not for a legacy, but for the sheer miracle of being. Watts would say, the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. So stop, breathe, look around. This is it. You're already here. You've always been here. You are the mystery, pretending to be a human, forgetting itself just enough to rediscover the joy of remembering. And when death comes, as it must, smile. Not because you're ready to go, but because you understand now there's nowhere else to be. But you were never born. You never die. You simply return to the dance. And the music never ends. Final challenge to the viewer. What part of you is still clinging to the illusion that you are just a name, a body, a story? And what would your life look like right now if you let that illusion go? You are not a drop in the ocean, my friend. You are the ocean in a drop. And now that you see it, what will you do? Because everything you believe about being human was wrong. And that's the best news you'll ever hear.